The morning sun was barely peeking through the clouds when Maria pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. She stood at the entrance of what used to be a horse stable, watching her 3 children sleep on a pile of old blankets and, hey, this wasn't how she imagined her life would turn out. Just 6 months ago, Maria had been living in a small but comfortable house with her husband Roberto and their children. Roberto worked at the local factory, and Maria took care of their home and kids. They weren't rich, but they had enough. The children went to school every day and there was always food on the table. Life was simple but good. Everything changed on that terrible Tuesday in March. Roberto was walking home from work when a drunk driver ran a red light. The accident happened so fast that Roberto didn't even have time to jump out of the way. Maria got the phone call at 3 in the afternoon. The voice on the other end was gentle, but the words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Roberto was gone. The next few weeks felt like a bad dream. People came to the house bringing food and flowers. They said kind things about Roberto and promised to help. But when the funeral was over and the visitors stopped coming, Maria realized she was completely alone with 3 young children to take care of. Roberto's job didn't provide much life insurance. After paying for the funeral, Maria had barely any money left. She tried to find work, but with no real job experience and 3 small children to watch, it was almost impossible. The few places that would hire her paid so little that she couldn't even afford childcare. The bills kept coming. First, she couldn't pay the electric bill. Then the water got shut off. The landlord was patient for a while, but after 3 months of no rent, he had no choice. Maria begged for more time, but he had his own family to think about. On the day they got kicked out, Maria packed everything they owned into 2 old suitcases and a few garbage bags. 8-year-old Isabella, her oldest, tried to be brave and help pack. 6-year-old Carlos kept asking when they were going home. Little Anna, who was only 4, didn't really understand what was happening but could tell something was very wrong. They spent the first night in Maria's old car, parked behind a grocery store. The children were scared and kept asking questions. Maria couldn't answer. Where would they sleep tomorrow? When would they have a real home again? Why couldn't they go back to their house? For 2 weeks they lived in the car. Maria would drive around during the day looking for work or a place to stay. At night they would park somewhere safe and try to sleep. It was summer, so at least they didn't freeze, but it was still terrible. The children were always hungry, and Maria was running out of the little money she had left. One evening, while driving on a back road outside of town, Maria saw an old barn. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. She pulled over and walked around the property. There was no house nearby, and no signs that anyone came here regularly. Behind the main barn, she found what used to be a stable for horses. The stable was old and run down, but it had a roof and walls. One of the stalls was bigger than the others and seemed to be in better shape. Maria realized this could be shelter for her family. It wasn't much, but it was better than sleeping in the car every night. That first night in the stable was both scary and hopeful. The children huddled close to Maria on their blankets. Every sound made them jump. What if someone found them? What if wild animals lived here? But as the night went on and nothing bad happened, they started to feel a little safer. Maria worked hard to make the stable livable. She swept out all the old dirt and hay. She found some boards to cover the broken parts of the walls. Using water from a nearby creek, she washed everything as best she could. It wasn't pretty, but it was clean. The children adapted faster than Maria expected. Isabella, always the responsible one, helped take care of Carlos and Anna while Maria looked for work. Carlos found ways to have fun pretending the stable was a fort or a castle. Little Anna was just happy to have her family together. Finding work was still Maria's biggest problem. She would walk to town early in the morning, leaving the children with strict instructions to stay hidden in the stable. Sometimes she found a few hours of work helping at a restaurant or cleaning someone's house. But it was never enough money and never regular work. Food was always a worry. Maria learned to stretch every dollar. She bought the cheapest bread and peanut butter she could find. The children learned to drink water instead of milk or juice. Sometimes, when Maria couldn't find any work, they would go to bed hungry. The hardest part wasn't the hunger or the cold nights. It was seeing her children try to be brave when they were scared. It was Isabella taking care of her younger siblings like a little mother. It was Carlos pretending he wasn't hungry when there wasn't enough food. It was Ana asking when Daddy was coming home, not really understanding that he never would. Maria felt like she was failing as a mother. These innocent children deserved so much better. They should be sleeping in real beds, not on hay in an old stable. They should be playing with toys, not making games out of sticks and stones. They should be going to school and making friends, not hiding in the woods all day. Every night after the children fell asleep, Maria would sit outside the stable and cry quietly. She missed Roberto so much it felt like a physical pain. She was angry at God for taking away her husband and leaving her alone with no way to take care of their children. She was scared about what would happen when winter came. The stable might keep them dry, but it wouldn't keep them warm when the snow started falling. But Maria was stronger than she knew. Even in her darkest moments, she never gave up. Every morning she got up and kept trying. She kept looking for work. She kept taking care of her children. She kept believing that somehow things would get better. The children could sense their mother's strength even when she felt weak. They learned not to complain even when they were uncomfortable. They learned to find joy in small things, like finding wild berries to eat or seeing a family of rabbits near the stable. They learned that as long as they had each other, they could get through anything. One thing that helped Maria keep going was remembering the good times with Roberto. She would tell the children stories about their father, keeping his memory alive. She remembered how he always said that no matter how bad things got, there was always hope. He believed that good things happened to good people, even if it took time. As summer turned into fall, Maria knew they couldn't stay in the stable much longer. The nights were getting colder, and she could see her breath in the morning air. She needed to find a real solution soon, or her family might not survive the winter. She started walking further from town, looking for any kind of opportunity. Maybe there was a farmer who needed help. Maybe there was a family who needed someone to clean house or watch children. She was willing to do any honest work if it meant providing for Isabella, Carlos, and Ana. Maria didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change in a way she never could have imagined. All those mornings of walking across fields and country roads, all those prayers for help, all that hope she forced herself to hold on to was about to pay off in the most unexpected way. The stable had become their temporary home, but it wouldn't be their permanent one. Maria's strength and determination, combined with a little bit of luck and the kindness of a stranger, were about to open doors she never knew existed. For now, though, Maria tucked the blankets around her sleeping children and tried to get some rest herself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but it might also bring new possibilities. She had learned that life could change in an instant, for better or for worse. All she could do was keep moving forward and hope that better days were coming. The old stable creaked in the wind, but inside, a mother's love kept her children safe and warm. It wasn't the home they had lost, but it was shelter. It wasn't the life they had planned, but they were together. And sometimes, when everything falls apart, being together is enough to help you keep going until something better comes along. Living in the old stable became a daily routine that none of them could have imagined just months before. Maria would wake up before sunrise every morning, not because she wanted to, but because the cold air would seep through the wooden walls and wake her up. The first thing she did was check on her children, making sure they were still warm under their pile of old blankets and coats. Isabella, Carlos, and Ana had learned to sleep close together for warmth. Sometimes Maria would find them all tangled, up like puppies in a basket, and despite everything they were going through, it would make her smile. These small moments of peace helped her get through each day. The morning routine was always the same. Maria would quietly slip out of the stable and walk to the creek that ran about 100 yards through the trees. The water was cold but clean, and she would fill up their plastic bottles and wash her face. Sometimes she would see deer drinking from the same creek, and they would look at each other for a moment before the deer would bound away into the forest. When she got back to the stable, the children would usually be waking up. Isabella was always first, just like her mother. The 8-year-old had developed a serious look in her eyes that made Maria's heart ache. No child should have to grow up so fast, but Isabella had taken on the role of helper without being asked. Carlos. The 6-year-old was still young enough to find adventure in their situation some days. He would pretend they were pioneers or explorers living in the wilderness. His imagination helped keep Anna entertained when Maria had to leave them alone to look for work. But there were other days when Carlos would get quiet and ask when they could go home. Those were the hardest days. Little Anna was adapting in the way that only very young children can. At 4 years old, she didn't fully understand how different their life had become. As long as her mother and siblings were with her, she felt safe. She had created an imaginary friend named Butterfly, who lived in the stable with them and helped keep her company. After everyone was awake, Maria would give the children their breakfast. It was usually the same thing every day: a piece of bread with peanut butter and some water. On good days, when Maria had found some work the day before, there might be a banana or an apple to share. On bad days, there might only be bread. The children never complained about the food, even though Maria knew they were often still hungry after eating. She remembered when they used to complain about having to eat vegetables or ask for seconds of dessert. Now they ate whatever was put in front of them and said thank you. After breakfast, Maria would get ready to walk into town to look for work. She only had 2 outfits that were decent enough to wear when talking to potential employers, so she had to be very careful to keep them clean. She would braid her hair back and put on a little lipstick that she had saved from her old life. It was important to look presentable, even though she felt anything but presentable. Before leaving, Maria would sit down with the children and go over the rules. They had heard them many times before, but she repeated them every day because their safety depended on it. Stay in or near the stable. Don't let anyone see you. If strangers come around, hide in the woods until they leave. Don't start any fires. Don't go near the creek without Isabella watching. Stay together. Isabella would nod seriously and promise to take care of Carlos and Anna. The responsibility was too much for an 8-year-old, but she never complained. She understood that their family was in trouble and that everyone had to do their part. The walk to town was 3 miles each way. Maria had worn holes in the bottom of her only pair of shoes, so she had stuffed cardboard inside to cover them. Her feet hurt by the time she reached the edge of town, but she couldn't afford to buy new shoes. Every dollar had to go toward food. Some days Maria would find a few hours of work. Mrs. Chen at the Chinese restaurant sometimes needed help washing dishes when her regular person didn't show up. The farm supply store occasionally needed someone to help move boxes or clean. A few of the nicer houses in town would hire her to do yard work or clean windows. The work was usually hard and the pay was low, but Maria was grateful for anything. She worked as hard as she could, hoping that people would remember her and call her back. She was always polite and never complained, even when someone was rude to her or treated her like she was invisible. But there were many days when she couldn't find any work at all. She would walk from business to business asking if they needed help. Most people would shake their heads and look away. Some would be kind about it, explaining that they just didn't have any work available. Others would be less kind, treating her like she was bothering them just by asking. On those days, Maria would walk back to the stable feeling defeated. The children would see her face and know without asking that there was no money for dinner. They had learned to recognize the difference between her good day face and her bad day face. When Maria came back from town, whether she had found work or not, she would sit down with the children for their daily lessons. She had managed to save a few books when they lost their house, including an old Bible and some children's storybooks. Using these books, she taught Isabella, Carlos, and Anna how to read and write. They would sit in a circle on their blankets, and Maria would point to words and have the children sound them out. Isabella was a fast learner and was soon helping to teach her younger siblings. Carlos liked the stories with animals in them. Anna just liked being close to her mother and hearing her voice. These lesson times were some of the happiest parts of their day. For an hour or two, they could forget about being hungry or cold or scared. They could imagine they were in a real school or a real home, learning together like a normal family. After lessons, the children would play while Maria tried to figure out how to stretch whatever food they had. She had become an expert at making a little bit go a long way. One can of beans could become 2 meals if she added enough water to make soup. A loaf of bread could last 3 days if they only ate small pieces at a time. The children had learned to find ways to entertain themselves, with almost nothing. Isabella would tell stories to Carlos and Ana, making up adventures about brave princesses and talking animals. Carlos would build forts out of sticks and stones, creating elaborate cities in the dirt floor of the stable. Ana would sing songs she remembered from when they used to watch TV, dancing around in her bare feet. Sometimes they would explore the area around the stable, always staying close enough that they could run back and hide if they needed to. They found berry bushes and learned which ones were safe to eat. They discovered a family of rabbits that lived under a fallen log. Carlos named them all and would tell Maria about what they had been doing each day. As the afternoon turned into evening, the family would gather together for dinner. It was usually something simple, maybe soup made from whatever Maria had been able to buy, or sandwiches if there was enough bread and peanut butter left. They would sit in their circle on the blankets and share their meal, talking about their day. Maria always tried to keep dinner time positive. She would ask the children what they had learned or what games they had played. She would tell them about the people she had met in town, or describe the pretty gardens she had seen. She wanted these moments to feel as normal as possible. After dinner, as the sun started to set, the family would prepare for the night. Maria would help the children wash their faces and hands with water from the creek. They would brush their teeth with the one toothbrush they shared, using just a tiny bit of the toothpaste that Maria was trying to make last as long as possible. Then came the best part of every day: story time. Maria would gather the children close to her and tell them stories. Sometimes they were stories she remembered from when she was little. Sometimes they were stories about their father, Roberto, keeping his memory alive. Sometimes she would make up new stories about magical places where families were always together and no one was ever hungry. The children would fall asleep one by one during story time. Ana usually went first, curled up against her mother's side. Carlos would try to stay awake but would eventually lose the battle, his eyes closing even as he tried to keep listening. Isabella, the little mother, would often stay awake the longest, as if she felt responsible for keeping watch over everyone. Once all 3 children were asleep, Maria would carefully cover them with every blanket and coat they had. She would tuck the blankets around them, trying to keep out the cold air that seemed to find its way through every crack in the stable walls. Then Maria would have her hardest time of the day, the quiet hours when she was alone with her thoughts. She would sit near the stable door listening to the sounds of the night and worrying about everything. Would she find work tomorrow? Was there enough food for breakfast? What would happen when winter really arrived? Were the children getting sick from living in these conditions? Sometimes the worry would become too much, and Maria would cry quietly so the children wouldn't hear her. She would think about Roberto and wonder what he would do in this situation. She would remember their old life and wonder if she would ever be able to give her children a normal childhood again. October had arrived with a chill that made Maria's bones ache every morning. The leaves on the trees around the stable were turning brilliant shades of red and gold. Beautiful to look at, but a reminder that winter was coming fast. Maria knew they couldn't survive another month in the stable once the real cold weather hit. That particular Tuesday morning started like all the others. Maria woke up before dawn, checked on her sleeping children, and made her way to the creek for their daily water supply. But something felt different about this day. Maybe it was the way the morning mist hung over the fields, or maybe it was just her imagination. But Maria had a strange feeling that something was about to change. She had found some work the day before helping Mrs. Rodriguez clean her house, so there was enough money to buy bread and a few apples for the children's breakfast. As she walked back from the creek, Maria allowed herself a moment of gratitude for these small blessings. At least today, her children wouldn't go hungry. Isabella was already awake when Maria returned, sitting quietly on their pile of blankets and watching her younger siblings sleep. The 8-year-old had been having trouble sleeping lately, and Maria worried that the stress of their situation was affecting her more than she let on. "Good morning, my brave girl," Maria whispered, sitting down next to Isabella and pulling her close. "Did you sleep at all?" Isabella shrugged the way children do when they don't want to worry their parents. A little bit. I was thinking about school. Do you think Carlos and Ana and I will ever get to go back to school? The question hit Maria like a punch to the chest. Of course, her children were thinking about school. It was October, and in their old life, this would have been the time for new backpacks and pencils, for learning about autumn leaves in science class, for making friends on the playground. Instead, her children were living in a stable and learning to read from an old Bible. Of course you will, Maria said, hoping her voice sounded more confident than she felt. This is just temporary. Things will get better, and when they do, you'll go back to school and learn everything you need to know. Isabella nodded, but Maria could see the doubt in her daughter's eyes. At 8 years old, Isabella was old enough to understand that their situation was serious and that promises about the future might not come true. Carlos and Ana woke up soon after, and the family went through their morning routine. Breakfast, lessons, and then Maria prepared for another day of looking for work in town. She had heard that the big farm on the other side of the valley sometimes hired people for seasonal work, and she planned to walk there after checking all her usual places in town. As always, Maria went over the safety rules with the children before she left. Isabella nodded seriously and promised to take care of Carlos and Ana. Carlos gave his mother a big hug and told her he would be good. Little Ana kissed Maria's cheek and asked her to bring back a surprise. Maria wished she could promise to bring back something special, but there was no money for surprises. The walk to town was longer than usual because Maria decided to take a different route. Instead of walking along the main road, she cut across the fields that stretched between the stable and the edge of town. She had seen other people walking this way, and it looked like it might be shorter. The field was beautiful in the morning light. The grass was still covered with dew, and there were wildflowers blooming along the fence line. For a moment, Maria allowed herself to enjoy the peaceful scene. When was the last time she had noticed something beautiful just for the sake of noticing it? She was about halfway across the field when she heard the sound of horses' hooves coming up behind her. Maria turned around and saw a man on horseback approaching. Her first instinct was to run. What if this was the owner of the property and she was trespassing? What if he was angry? What if he called the police? But something about the man's posture as he rode toward her didn't seem threatening. He was sitting relaxed in his saddle, and when he got close enough for her to see his face, Maria saw that he looked more curious than angry. The man pulled his horse to a stop about 10 feet away from Maria. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with graying hair under a worn cowboy hat. His clothes were clean but well used, the kind that working people wear. His eyes were kind, but Maria could see that he was studying her carefully. "Morning," he said, touching the brim of his hat in a polite gesture. "I don't think I've seen you around here before." Maria's heart was pounding, but she forced herself to speak calmly. "Good morning. I'm sorry if I'm trespassing. I was just trying to get to town." The man smiled, and Maria felt some of her fear ease. "No need to apologize. This field gets used as a shortcut all the time. I'm William Patterson. I own the farm on the other side of that hill." He pointed toward the direction Maria had been walking. "I'm Maria," she said, not sure how much more to reveal about herself. William nodded and was quiet for a moment, still studying her face. Maria wondered what he was seeing. Probably a woman who looked tired and worn down, whose clothes had seen better days, who was walking across a field at 7 in the morning instead of driving like most people would. "You heading to town looking for work?" William asked gently. The question surprised Maria. How did he know? Then she realized it must be obvious. Her early morning walk, her clothes, the way she carried herself. She nodded, not trusting her. Voice to stay steady. "What kind of work do you do?" William asked. "Anything honest," Maria replied. "I can clean, cook, help with yard work, watch children. I'm not picky." William was quiet again for a long moment, and Maria wondered if she should continue walking. But something made her stay. Maybe it was the kindness in his eyes, or maybe it was just desperation. But she found herself wanting to talk to this stranger. "You got family?" William asked. The question opened something inside Maria that she had been trying to keep closed. Before she knew it, she was telling this man on horseback about Roberto's death, about losing their home, about her 3 children. She told him about living in his old stable, though she was careful not to reveal exactly where it was. William listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious as Maria's story unfolded. When she finished talking, they stood in silence for a moment. Maria felt embarrassed for sharing so much with a stranger, but there was something about William that made her feel safe. "That old stable behind the hill," William said quietly. "The one that used to belong to my grandfather. That's where you and your children are living?" Maria's heart sank. Of course it was his property. Of course she had been caught. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "We'll leave today. I know we were trespassing, but we didn't have anywhere else to go, and it was just supposed to be temporary until I could find something better." William held up his hand to stop her. "Hold on now. I'm not angry. Well, I'm concerned. That old stable isn't fit for people to live in, especially not children. And winter's coming." "I know," Maria said, tears starting to form in her eyes despite her efforts to stay strong. "I've been trying to find something else, but with no money for a deposit and no references, it's been impossible." William was quiet again, but Maria could see that his mind was working. He looked out over the field, then back at Maria, then toward the direction of the stable. "I got a proposition for you," he said finally. "But first, I want to meet your children. A person can tell a lot about someone by looking at their kids." Maria felt a surge of panic. What if he called social services? What if he decided the children weren't being properly cared for? What if this was the beginning of losing them forever? "They're good children," she said quickly. "They're clean and well-behaved, and I've been teaching them their letters and numbers. They're not wild or anything like that." William smiled. "I'm sure they are. From what you've told me about your situation and the fact that you're out here at 7 in the morning looking for work instead of feeling sorry for yourself, I figure you're probably a good mother doing your best in a tough situation." He paused and looked directly into Maria's eyes. "Here's what I'm thinking. I got a big house that feels too empty since my wife passed 5 years ago. My own kids are grown and moved away. I got plenty of room, and I could use some help around the place. What would you say to bringing your children up to the house so we can all meet properly?" Maria stared at him, not sure she had heard correctly. "You want us to come to your house?" "Just to talk," William said. "No commitments from either of us. But if we get along, maybe we can work something out that would help both of us. I need someone to help keep house and maybe help with the cooking. You need a place for your family to live. Might be that we can help each other." Maria felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. People didn't just offer to help strangers like this, did they? There had to be a catch. Some reason why this was too good to be true. "I don't understand," she said. "You don't even know us. Why would you want to help us?" William was quiet for a moment, looking off toward the hills. "My wife and I, we weren't blessed with an easy road either when we were young. There was a time when we didn't have much and people helped us when they didn't have to. I learned that when you got the ability to help someone, especially someone with children, you do it. It's just the right thing to do." Maria's hands were shaking as she gathered her children around her outside the stable. Isabella, Carlos, and Ana looked up at their mother with curious eyes, sensing that something important was about to happen. The morning sun was getting higher, and Maria knew that William would be waiting for them, but she needed to prepare her children for what might be the most important conversation of their lives. "I met someone this morning," Maria began, choosing her words carefully. "A man named William who owns the big farm on the hill. He knows we've been staying here in the stable." Isabella's eyes widened with fear. "Are we in trouble? Do we have to leave?" "No, sweetie," Maria said quickly, pulling her oldest daughter close. "We're not in trouble. Actually, he wants to help us. He's asked us to come to his house so we can all meet each other." Carlos, always the practical one despite being only 6, asked the question that was probably on all their minds. "Does he have food at his house?" Maria smiled despite her nervousness. "I think so, honey, but more than that, he might have a place for us to live. A real house with real beds and a real kitchen. Little Anna clapped her hands together. Can Butterfly come too? She asked, referring to her imaginary friend. Of course Butterfly can come, Maria said, kissing the top of Anna's head. But I need you all to listen very carefully. This man seems very nice, but we don't know him yet. We're just going to visit and talk. If any of you feel scared or uncomfortable, you tell me right away, okay? The children nodded solemnly. They had learned to trust their mother's judgment completely over these difficult months, but they had also learned to be cautious around strangers. Maria helped them wash their faces and hands at the creek and tried to make their clothes look as neat as possible. It wasn't much, but she wanted them to make a good impression. As they walked across the field toward William's house, Maria's heart pounded with a mixture of hope and terror. What if this was all some kind of mistake? What if William changed his mind when he saw how desperate they really were? What if he wanted something from them that Maria couldn't give? She had heard stories about people who took advantage of families in difficult situations, and she couldn't bear the thought of putting her children in danger. But as they approached the big white farmhouse, Maria saw William sitting on his front porch with a pot of coffee and what looked like a plate of cookies. He stood up as they got closer, and his face broke into a warm smile. Well, hello there, he said gently, addressing the children. You must be Isabella, Carlos, and Anna. Your Mama told me a lot about you. Isabella stepped slightly in front of her younger siblings, her protective instincts kicking in. Hello, she said politely but cautiously. Carlos was staring at the cookies with wide eyes, and Anna was hiding behind Maria's skirt, peeking out at this new person. I thought you all might be hungry, William said, gesturing toward the porch. I made some fresh coffee for your mama, and there's milk and cookies for you kids. Sound good? The mention of milk made all three children look up hopefully. It had been weeks since they'd had anything to drink besides water from the creek. They climbed the steps to the porch, and Maria was amazed at how normal it felt to sit in a real chair at a real table. William poured her a cup of coffee, actual, hot, fresh coffee, and she had to resist the urge to cry at this simple pleasure she had almost forgotten existed. The children sat quietly at first, but the cookies were too tempting to resist. As they ate, William began asking them gentle questions about their favorite games, their favorite stories, what they liked to learn about. He had a natural way with children, and Maria could see her kids beginning to relax. Carlos, your mama, tells me you like to build things, William said. I've got a workshop behind the house with all kinds of wood scraps and tools. Of course, the tools would be for grown-ups to use, but there's plenty of safe materials for building forts and such. Carlos's eyes lit up. Really? Like real wood? Real wood, William confirmed. And Isabella? I heard you're helping teach your brother and sister their letters. That's pretty impressive for someone who's 8 years old. Isabella blushed but looked pleased. Mama says education is important even if we can't go to real school right now. Your mama's right about that, William said. Actually, there's a real good school just down the road from here, walking distance. Of course, that's just something to think about for the future. Maria felt her heart skip. The possibility of her children going back to real school seemed too wonderful to believe. William turned to little Anna, who was still being shy. Anna, I heard you like to sing. I've got an old piano in the house that hasn't been played in years. Maybe you could help me remember how to make music again. Anna smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. I know lots of songs. Mama taught them to me. As the morning went on, Maria watched her children become more comfortable with William. He seemed genuinely interested in what they had to say, and he spoke to them like they were intelligent people worth listening to, not just children to be managed. Finally, when the cookies were gone and the children were playing quietly on the porch steps, William turned to Maria with a serious expression. I've been thinking about this since we talked in the field, he said. Here's what I'm proposing. There's a small house about a quarter mile from the main house, used to be where my foreman lived before he retired. It's got 3 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and a bathroom with running water. It's been empty for 2 years, but it's in good shape. Maria's breath caught in her throat. You're offering us a house? I'm offering us a trade, William corrected. You and your family get a place to live, and I get help with the housework, cooking, and general upkeep around here. It's a big property, and since my wife died, I've been letting a lot of things slide." He paused and looked out over his land. "I'm not getting any younger, and I could use someone reliable to help keep things running. Someone who understands what it means to work hard and be grateful for what they have." Maria felt overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever hoped for." "There's no catch," William said gently, seeing the doubt in her eyes. "No strings attached. Just honest work for honest pay and a safe place for your children to grow up. If it doesn't work out for any reason, you're free to leave any time with no hard feelings." Isabella, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Mama, does this mean we could have our own rooms?" William chuckled. "Well, the house has 3 bedrooms, so I suppose that's up to your mama to decide how she wants to arrange things." Carlos jumped up excitedly. "And I could build things in the workshop?" "With supervision," William said. "Safety first. But yes, there's plenty of room for building projects." Anna tugged on Maria's sleeve. "Mama, would we have a real kitchen? With a stove that works?" Maria looked at her children's hopeful faces and felt tears starting to fall. For months, she had been trying to be strong for them, to hide her own fear and desperation. But now, faced with this incredible offer of kindness, she couldn't hold back her emotions anymore. "Hey now," William said softly, offering her his handkerchief. "No need for tears. This is supposed to be good news." "They are good tears," Maria managed to say. I can't believe this is real. People don't just help strangers like this." "Some people do," William said simply. "My wife used to say that kindness is like planting seeds. You never know what's going to grow, but you plant them anyway because it's the right thing to do." Maria wiped her eyes and looked at this man who was offering her family a miracle. "What kind of work would you need me to do?" "Nothing too complicated," William said. "Help keep the main house clean, do some cooking. I'm getting tired of my own bachelor meals. Maybe help with some of the farm paperwork if you're good with numbers, and during busy seasons there might be some outdoor work if you're willing." "I'm willing to do whatever needs doing," Maria said firmly. "I'm a hard worker and I'm reliable. If you give us this chance, you won't regret it." William smiled. "I don't think I will, but I want you to take some time to think about it. This is a big decision for your family." Isabella, who had been thinking quietly, asked a very grown-up question. "Mr. William, why do you want to help us? We're strangers and we don't have anything to give you except work." William looked at the 8-year-old with respect. "That's a smart question, Isabella. The truth is, helping your family helps me too. I've been lonely since my wife died, and this big house feels too empty. Having people around who appreciate what they have, people who understand the value of hard work and family, well, that would make my life better too." He paused and looked at all 4 of them. "Sometimes when you help others, you end up helping yourself. That's just how life works sometimes." Maria felt a peace settling over her that she hadn't experienced in months. This felt right. Not just the offer of a home and work, but the man making the offer. There was something about William that reminded her of her own father, who had always said that you could judge a person's character by how they treated people who had nothing to offer them in return. "We don't need time to think about it," Maria said. "If you're sure about this offer, then we accept." Gratefully, William's face broke into a wide grin. "Well then, let's go take a look at your new home." Moving day arrived with the most beautiful sunrise Maria had seen in months. She woke up in the stable for the last time, and instead of the usual worry about finding work or food, she felt something she had almost forgotten: excitement about the future. The children were already awake, sitting together on their pile of blankets and talking in hushed, excited voices about their new home. They had packed their few belongings the night before, which didn't take long since everything they owned fit into 2 old suitcases and some grocery bags. "Is it really happening, Mama?" Anna asked, her 4-year-old eyes wide with wonder. "Are we really going to live in a real house?" "Yes, sweetheart," Maria said, pulling her youngest daughter onto her lap. We're really going to have our own home. Again. Isabella, ever the responsible one, was making sure they didn't leave anything behind. She had organized their few books, the extra clothes, and even the plastic bottles they used for water from the creek. At 8 years old, she had learned not to take anything for granted. Carlos was bouncing with energy, asking a dozen questions about the workshop William had mentioned. Do you think he has hammers and nails? Can I really build something today? We'll have to ask Mr. William, Maria said. But I think the first thing we need to do is get settled in our new house and then see how we can help him with his work. As they walked across the field one last time, carrying their belongings, Maria turned, back to look at the old stable. It had sheltered them during the worst time of their lives, and she felt a strange gratitude toward the rundown building that had kept them together as a family. William was waiting for them on the porch of their new house, and Maria was touched to see that he had hung a small welcome home sign on the front door. He helped them carry their things inside, and Maria was amazed all over again at the sight of real furniture, electric lights that worked, and a kitchen with running water. I stocked the refrigerator and pantry with some basics, William said, opening the refrigerator to show shelves full of food. Milk, eggs, bread, some fruits and vegetables. Nothing fancy, but enough to get you started. Maria stared at the abundance of food and felt tears starting again. You've already done so much. I don't know how we'll ever repay your kindness. By making this place a home again, William said simply. It's been empty too long. Houses need families in them to come alive. The first few days in their new home were like a wonderful dream. The children took baths every single day, just because they could. They slept in real beds with clean sheets and warm blankets. They ate regular meals at a real table in a real kitchen. Isabella discovered that there were other children living on nearby farms, and for the first time in months, she had friends to play with. Carlos spent hours with William in the workshop, learning to use simple tools and building birdhouses and toy boxes. Anna found that the house had wonderful acoustics for singing, and she would wander from room to room, filling the space with her sweet voice. Maria threw herself into her work with a dedication that impressed William. She cleaned every corner of his big farmhouse until it sparkled. She reorganized his kitchen and began cooking meals that filled the house with delicious smells. She helped with the farm paperwork, and William discovered that she had a natural head for numbers and organization. You're making this old place feel like a home again, William told her one evening as they sat on his porch after dinner. I haven't had a real home-cooked meal in 2 years, and now I remember what I was missing. It feels good to be useful again, Maria replied, to have a purpose beyond just surviving from day to day. As the weeks passed, Maria and William developed an easy working relationship that gradually became a genuine friendship. They would have coffee together in the mornings while planning the day's work. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything from farming techniques to their dreams for the children's futures. William shared stories about his late wife Elena and how they had built their farm together from nothing. He talked about his own children, now grown and living in distant cities, and how much he missed having young voices in his house. Maria told him about Roberto and their early years of marriage, about the dreams they had shared and the love that had sustained them through difficult times. She talked about her fears as a single mother and her determination to give her children the best life possible. The children blossomed in this environment of stability and care. Isabella enrolled in the local school and quickly caught up with her classmates, her natural intelligence shining through despite the months she had missed. Her teacher commented on how mature and responsible she was, clearly unaware of what this 8-year-old had experienced. Carlos also thrived in school, making friends easily and excelling in subjects that allowed him to build and create. His teacher noted his mechanical aptitude and suggested that he might have a future in engineering or construction. The little boy who had once pretended sticks were building materials now had access to real tools and materials to fuel his imagination. Anna, still too young for regular school, spent her days helping Maria with light housework and playing in the safe environment of the farm. Her imaginary friend Butterfly gradually became less important as she made friends with the farm animals and found real playmates among the neighboring children. As autumn turned into winter, Maria realized something wonderful was happening. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. Her children weren't just getting by, they were thriving. The fear and desperation that had consumed her thoughts for so many months had been replaced by hope and gratitude. One snowy evening, in December, as Maria was helping William with some paperwork in his study, he looked up from his ledger and asked a question that caught her off guard. "Maria, do you ever think about getting married again?" The question surprised her, not because it was inappropriate. Their friendship had grown close enough for such personal conversations, but because she hadn't really considered the possibility. For so long, her entire focus had been on survival and providing for her children. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I loved Roberto so much, and for a while I couldn't imagine loving anyone else. But lately—" She paused, not sure how to finish the thought. "Lately?" William prompted gently. "Lately I've been thinking that maybe love isn't something you only get once in a lifetime. Maybe if you're very lucky, you get a second chance." William was quiet for a moment, then closed his ledger and looked directly at her. "I've been thinking the same thing. Elena was the love of my youth, and I'll never forget her or stop loving her memory. But you and your children have brought life back to this old place, and to this old heart." Maria felt her pulse quicken. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? "I know this might seem fast," William continued, "but at our age we know what we want and what matters. I've come to love you, Maria. Not just as a friend or employee, but as a woman I want to build a future with. And I love those children like they were my own grandchildren." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but these were tears of joy, not sadness. "I love you too," she said softly. "I didn't expect it, and I wasn't looking for it, but it happened anyway." William reached across the table and took her hand. "Then maybe we should think about making this arrangement permanent, not just as employer and employee, but as husband and wife, as a real family." "What about the children?" Maria asked, though. She already knew the answer from watching how William interacted with Isabella, Carlos, and Ana. Those children need a father figure, and I need young people in my life to keep me feeling young myself. We're all good for each other. That Christmas was the most joyful the family had experienced since Roberto's death. The house was filled with the sounds of children's laughter, the smells of home cooking, and the warmth of people who had found each other when they needed it most. William proposed to Maria on Christmas Eve, presenting her with his grandmother's ring and asking not just her, but all three children, if they would be willing to become a real family together. The children's enthusiastic yes was all the answer he needed. They were married the following spring in a simple ceremony in their backyard, surrounded by friends from the community who had watched their unlikely love story unfold. Isabella was the maid of honor, Carlos was the ring bearer, and Ana scattered flower petals with the seriousness of someone performing a very important job. As Maria walked toward William in her simple white dress, she thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, the loss and grief that had seemed insurmountable, the months of desperation and fear in the old stable, the morning when she walked across the field and met a stranger who would change her life forever. She had learned that life could take everything away in an instant, but she had also learned that it could give back in ways she never could have imagined. She had lost her first love, but she had found her second. Her children had lost their father, but they had gained a man who loved them as his own. Years later, as Maria and William sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the same yard where Isabella, Carlos, and Ana had once played, she would often think about that old stable. It was still there behind the hill, weathered and empty, but somehow sacred to her.